Hello everyone, this is Tim, and it is Friday morning, the 3rd of September. The reason for making this video is because I just got back from another road trip. I left on Monday, August the 16th, and got back Monday of this week, the 30th of August. And you may notice the backdrop is a little bit different than some of my previous videos, and that is because I'm house sitting for some friends who are away for the weekend. So this is not my living room. This road trip was probably, well, definitely very different than any other that I've taken yet. I mean, it was really just life-changing. And that's part of why I'm waiting till after the fact to make a video rather than record it from the road like I've done previously. But how this trip came together was about 3 months ago. Someone that I had been best friends with in high school had contacted me and asked me about my intention of making a trip to Pennsylvania this summer. And I told him that I was looking forward to doing that. I seem to go once a year to go visit my family. So he told me about an event that was scheduled to take place in August in Pennsylvania. He asked me if I wanted to go. I said, sure, buy a ticket, and worst case scenario, I don't make it, I'll just reimburse you for the ticket regardless. So another one of my best friends from school got word of this and contacted me and told me that, looking forward to seeing me. His dad has asked about me and his stepmom, and can't wait to see you and all this stuff. I'm like, cool, I'll let you know when I get into town. So I arrive in Pennsylvania because I went there directly from Arizona. I didn't really stop anywhere along the way. Before I actually left for this trip, I need to back up here. The friend who had, told me about the event, he contacted me. He sent me a message a couple days before I left, and he's like, "Oh, you did get a COVID shot, didn't you?" I'm like, "No." And he proceeded to tell me why I should, and I didn't bother responding to him. And then he sent me an announcement from the venue of this event stating that you couldn't enter the venue unless you could provide evidence of being tested and not having the virus. And if you wanted to get on the floor of the venue, you had to provide proof that you were fully vaccinated, whatever that means. And so I'm like, "Are we on the floor?" He's like, "No." I said, "Okay, I'll get a test when I get there." And he proceeded to engage me in a conversation about this subject again. He's like, "I don't understand. What are you afraid of? It's just a little needle. It's no big deal." And I told him it has nothing to do with fear. I said it has to do with conscience. And when this conversation first started, the first thing I did is I called my brother and I said, "I have a feeling this isn't going to end well. I could just tell from the get-go." And I said, "If it doesn't, can I stay at your place? Because my friend, part of the arrangement of me coming to Pennsylvania was that he had offered his guest room to me, and I knew that that wasn't going to be happening at this point, so I made previous arrangements." And so I told my friend that, if this is an issue, I don't want to intrude on your hospitality. I've already made arrangements to stay with my brother. And he's like, "Yeah, I think that would be best, because my wife has something and she's afraid that having an unvaccinated person in the house would make it worse. So, no problem. It's your house. Um, so I arrive, and he's like, "Well, did you get your shot yet?" And I'm like, "No." Uh, so I get tested, and the doctor at the clinic was pretty intent on not allowing me to take the quick test, the rapid test, because I traveled from out of state, and according to the internet, there's a big outbreak of this other variant here in Arizona, and I didn't laugh, but in my mind I thought it's funny that, people will, ridicule people for getting data from the internet to make medical decisions, and here this doctor relied on the internet to get information about my environment, where I come from. He could have just asked. Nobody's sick where I am, okay? uh, so anyway, the morning of the event, my friend's like, "Well, did you get your test results yet?" And I said, "No, they're going to come on my phone. They gave me the website for the lab that's doing the work, and I could just access it whenever." I said, "If anything, we could just go on with our day, and if I don't get my results in time, I'll wait out in the parking lot. You go to the event, and, we'll just make the best of it." And he was like, "Well, at this point, I think I'll just take my wife." And I was just like, "Okay, that's fine." And that was the end of our conversation. He did not speak to me the rest of the time that I was there. And all the other stuff he wanted to do, never heard a word about it. So I contacted my other friend after I realized, this event and my participation in it wasn't going to happen. I contacted my other friend that was like, couldn't wait to see me. And I said, "Hey, I got the whole day available. All my plans canceled. Today would be the best day for us to hang out." And he writes back and he's like, "Oh, well, my little brother's birthday is today, blah, blah. And, we're all going to this restaurant." And I'm like, "Oh, well, can I come along too?" And he's like, "Oh, no, my dad made reservations and we didn't include you." And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Oh, just out of curiosity, did you get a COVID shot?" I'm like, "No." And didn't hear a word from him the rest of the time I was there. He never contacted me, except the morning that I left. He sent me a text and said, "Have a safe trip home." Thanks. So, the reason for bringing this up is the way, when my one friend said I didn't understand, well, that's evidence that he doesn't even know me. And if he did, he would understand. He would totally understand my approach to life and the knowledge that I have regarding the cause and effect relationship to health and illness. It wouldn't be a dilemma. And my other friend, when he was like, "Well, just curious," I don't believe it was curiosity that was the motive there. If he knew me, he wouldn't be curious. He would just know, because that's what friendship is. It's a relationship that people have based on the knowledge that they have of one another. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these two people are the only people on the entire planet, ever since this whole, outbreak started, that have ever confronted me over my vaccination status. And it's, I have to give a little bit of a background here. When I met these two guys, we were like the Three Stooges in school. We just did everything together. I met the one guy, and then a year later, I met the other guy. And we all just connected. And, we didn't worry about, grown-up issues. Most kids don't feel that they have to subject their friends to a psychological analysis before they be friends with them. So I didn't realize these guys had daddy issues until later, when something happened to me to made me realize that I wasn't as much of a grown-up as I thought I was. And I wanted to do something about it. And when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. So when the resources came into my life that I saw would serve to bring me to this place that I wanted to be, I shared this information with my two friends, different times, different locations, and they both responded the same way. They basically ridiculed me and told me I was an idiot for going this way. So, like I said, it's kind of poetic that things have come full circle like this, because for me, I have never asked anybody for their vaccination status. And that is because, one, it's none of my business, and two, it doesn't matter, because my relationship to somebody is not going to change because they have or have not gotten a shot. I'm not going to look down on somebody because they've gotten vaccinated, and I'm not going to be afraid of somebody else because they haven't. So, this was a very resolute way to begin this road trip, because, back when these two guys made it very clear that we were going separate ways, I really didn't do hardly anything since then to reach out to either one of them to try and, get with them to go do whatever. I just didn't, because, I was doing my thing. But at the same time, I don't hate them, don't have anything against them. So if they would contact me, I would talk to them. If they wanted me to come over or help them with something, I would. No hard feelings. But I kind of have a sense I won't be hearing from either one of them ever again. I would really be surprised. It's almost like this virus is my servant rather than my enemy. It's like it's keeping people away from me that really don't want anything to do with me, but would like to get whatever they can from me. And considering where I am in life right now with the price of hex, that's not a bad thing. Another thing that happened on this trip, moving on to another subject, is I got to meet up with my two nieces, which are my brother's daughters, and picked them up, took them to breakfast, and we just spent the day together, just talked about life. They had some questions about their ancestry, which I have quite a bit of information on regarding our grandmother's side of our family, my dad's mother. It's all documented, so I have the book. And it goes back to the 1500s in France. It's pretty fascinating. So we had a nice long talk about that, and we visited with my mother, their grandmother, and had a good time over there. At one point, this is what makes it interesting. I had gone to the mall previously in the local area, and I bought myself a pair of sunglasses that I don't think I've ever bought sunglasses in my life. I usually find them. People leave them on job sites. One guy left a pair in my truck the day that he quit, stuff like that. But I bought myself a pair of sunglasses because they have hexagon frames. They're a Ray-Ban sunglasses. And I posted a picture on Twitter. I asked my mom, how much do you think I paid for these? And she guessed, and when I told her the price, she was like, oh! And I snapped a selfie at the perfect moment. And so anyway, talking with my nieces about life and school, and sunglasses. And I asked them, what do you girls think of Louis Vuitton? And, they're just like, the clothes are kind of weird. Backpacks are okay, but, it was obvious it was something they could take it or leave it. There was a Louis Vuitton store at the mall. And if my nieces would have been like, oh, Uncle Timmy, can you take us to the mall and buy us each a Louis Vuitton backpack for school? I would have done it. But I was kind of surprised with their response. That wasn't how they reacted at all. As a matter of fact, the one girl, she's like, there's this guy in school, and he wears this diamond-encrusted Rolex watch. And I'm thinking, yeah, I know a guy who's got a bunch of those. And she's like, the kids pick on him. They're like, bro, who's dumber, you or your parents, that you're flexing a Rolex in a public school? Why don't you use that money to go buy a real education? I'm like, wow, that's wisdom talking there. So they were content to go to Dairy Queen when it was all done. So it made for a good day. And I didn't end up having to get rid of a good chunk of my Tesla payment to buy school supplies. And another aspect to this trip that happened while I was in Pennsylvania, and this was really big, because the second most looked forward to event that I saw in relationship to this road trip was meeting up with a friend of mine who's in Hex, who owns a restaurant, and his one brother also has steak. And we were going to meet so I can help them do some more steaks and to onboard a mutual friend of theirs who is a real estate agent. And my friend Vinny, he said, hey, why don't you come over early? I'll treat you to dinner at this place across the street from my restaurant. I said, great. So we go to dinner. We walk in there. There's like 3 guys at the bar. They all know Vinny. And I was like, hey, man, meet Timmy. He's this great guy. And he's going to talk about Hex. You guys need to come over to my restaurant when you're done eating. We're going to get all into this. You guys got to hear about this. And we eat, and then we go back to his restaurant. And there's some other guy out there. Restaurant's not even open, but there's some guy outside using a Wi-Fi or whatever. And he's like, hey, you need to meet my friend Timmy here. And, he's going to talk about Hex. He's like, oh, I'm not really into crypto, but my son is. And he's like, well, call him. Tell him to come over. So this kid comes over. By the time we all sit down in Vinny's restaurant, there's like 9 of us there. And I was expecting a crowd of 3, not 9. And, everybody's just kind of gathered around this big, long table. And Vinny's like, hey, Timmy, why don't you just get up in front of everybody and tell us all about Hex? I'm like, sure, no problem. So, stand up. I tell the folks, about my experience in cryptocurrency, which has been about 10 years now. Different things that caught my attention over the years. How I met Richard, what Hex is, and after giving like a 10-minute introduction, this guy at the other end of the table, big guy, he's like taller than me, 6'6", like 250 pounds, just like a football player, loud, had quite a bit to drink, I think. And he's like, pulls out his phone and he's like, I got into this Coinbase thing a while back, and what is this crypto anyway? It looks like a bunch of crap to me. And it's like, I'd answer him. And then, I'd say something. He would interject his point of view. And this went on like the whole time. He was just heckling everything I said. He was like challenging me. And I kind of found it a little entertaining because in a way, I can tell he was doing it on purpose. So I wasn't getting triggered. It's just whatever he said, I just spoke to it. And what was really interesting is one of the other people there, there was another teenage boy there. There was the one kid that came over, and then there was another kid that is actually Vinny's daughter's boyfriend, who is quite knowledgeable of crypto. And I believe he's going to college to be an accountant, so he knows finance and stuff. But he was presenting the adversarial point of view against Hex. The other guy was just, just questioning cryptocurrency in general. The big challenge with him was getting him to understand the digital world, not so much Hex. And that was the case with everybody. The big challenge was getting people to comprehend digital assets compared to material assets. But this other kid, the accountant, he was basically regurgitating all the same stuff that we've dealt with on Twitter regarding Hex is going to rug pull. Hex is just a hot potato that's being passed around until people can just make a run on the bank and dump everything and drive it to zero. Richard Hart's a marketer. He's not, a tech guy. All this stuff. And I really didn't confront him, because I was being respectful to Vinny. I didn't want to badger his potential future son-in-law. So I just let him do his thing. And it turns out some of the other people there, they understood the fallacy of his whole understanding of money and finance. It's like he was just presenting a narrative that is unrealistic, and other people were confronting him on that. So it's like I didn't even have to defend Hex. Other people were defending Hex inadvertently, which, just took a big burden off my shoulders until it's like the whole room was in an argument. Finally, I took the chair and I slammed it on the ground. And I just said, look, if you people want me to talk about this product, that's fine. But you all need to shut up and let me do the talking, because I'm not going to try and argue over top of any of you. And everybody just looked at me like, oh. And so I continued, talking about what Hex is and how it works. And finally, after about an hour, little over an hour, we stopped the whole discussion thing, and everybody kind of had a bathroom break and stuff. But before that happened, there's one thing that needs to be mentioned here. Is this guy at the other end of the table, one of the questions he asked me is like, is this even real? Have you actually sold any of this stuff and, bought anything? And I said, well, I've been in cryptocurrency for 10 years and I never sold a dime of it ever. Until a few days before I took this trip. I cashed out some Hex. I cashed out about $10,000 worth of Hex to put aside towards my new car. I said, I'm 51 years old. I've never owned a new car in my entire life. And part of the reason for that is because I've been practicing delayed gratification in order to get the car of my dreams. And I said, that car is a Lamborghini Countach. And I said, now that I can actually afford one of those, I don't want one. I said, I was introduced to something about a year ago that completely changed my whole perspective towards automobiles. I want a different kind of car, and I can't think of ever getting anything else. And this guy's like, oh, really? What kind of car is that? And I said, a Tesla Model Y. And his whole attitude changed after that. He's like, wow, man, I just want to get up and give you a hug. He's like, my Model S is parked in the parking lot right there. So that changed the whole tenor of the room after that. And it was about maybe 10 minutes later that we were done talking. And there was an older man in the room who came up to me afterwards, because, after we were done, this other man, he comes up to me and he apologized for heckling me so much, because his two friends that were with him were even kind of embarrassed at how this guy was behaving, and I thought it was more funny than embarrassing. But he hands me his phone. He's like, I got all this stuff on Coinbase. How do I convert it all to Hex? I looked at his phone. I'm just like, like, you have a laptop? He's like, I really don't want to download software on your phone and do all this right now. So he's like, no, it's at home. So we didn't do his transaction right then and there. But like right after that, there was another man there, an older man. He comes up to me. He's like, do you know who that is? I'm like, no. Then he told me his name, but I don't really remember it. So he told me, he's like, he's like an investment, him and his friends, they're investment bankers. They manage people's investment portfolios. They manage millions and millions of dollars. It's like, they're always looking for something to diversify in. And that made sense because at the beginning of my talk, that guy mentioned a lady named Susie Ormond, who recommends that people have at least 3 to 5% of their portfolio in some kind of cryptocurrency. So it all made sense the way he was responding to me, who he is, what he does. So I'm like, oh, neat. But anyway, this guy's like, hey, come on outside, let me show you my car. And his Model S was just beautiful. I mean, even though it was dark, it was just, I could see enough of it to recognize just how awesome this car. And he's like, yeah, man, I had it wrapped with this like super protective coating. He's like, you can take a wire brush and scrape the side of the car and it won't leave scratch marks. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. So he hands me the key fob. He's like, I'm going to be hanging out for about 10 more minutes. He said, take it for a drive. I looked out, I'm like, are you serious? It's like, I've never driven one of these cars before. He's like, it's no big deal. He's like, if you change the settings on the seats, just don't save them. I'm like, no problem. So I get in a car. I'm like, I'm not going to waste time with the seats. I knew how to put it in reverse and drive. So, I just creep out of the place and I go to the parking lot of the grocery store next door and I'm driving around like 5 miles an hour. I'm like, I'm driving a Tesla. I can't believe it. And finally, I take it out of the parking lot. And I go on this side street, and I just floored it. And man, that thing just, you get whipped back in the seat. And it feels like you're doing a wheelie almost. And that thing just went from like 0 to 50 in like a second. And I did that like 4 times, twice up and down each side of the road before I took it back. And I was telling him about it. He's like, man, it's actually better when you're going about 40 and you slam on it. You go from 40 to like 120. He's like, that's actually even better. And I'm just like, wow. So I got to drive my first Tesla on this trip. And it was pretty awesome. I want to figure out how to turn on the radio. Or at least play music. It wasn't the radio. He just had something displayed on his monitor, and I just saw some things, and I just clicked on something just to get a sense of the sound, because those cars have like 22 speakers or something like that in them. It was just awesome. So, yeah, that night was very, very good. And after everybody left, it was just me and Vinny. We were the last 2 people in his restaurant. And he's like, dude, do you know what happened tonight? I'm like, yeah, I guess. He's like, I've never seen anybody get up in front of a group of people impromptu like you did and be able to give a presentation on something as professionally as you did. It's like you looked everybody in the eye, you were respectful to everybody, you handled objections professionally, he's like, I've never seen anything like that. He's like, you should do this on a regular basis. He's like, I can make a couple phone calls and we can get another crowd of people here, anytime. He's like, do you realize that within, you spoke for an hour, and because of that, like over $50,000 went into Hex in like an hour because of you. And I'm like, well, since you put it that way, yeah, that is kind of phenomenal. So, the fact is, the real estate agent actually never made it to the meeting. We ended up meeting up the next morning at Vinny's restaurant, and we had breakfast together, the 3 of us. And this man, he he hands me his phone. He's like, yeah, I bought this Ethereum stuff like a year ago. I never knew what to do with it, and it's doubled in value, which is cool. And he's like, I really don't understand this crypto stuff, and I don't understand this hex thing you're talking about, but I trust what you're saying. So, you know, I believe it'll be worthwhile. So let's just take all this Ethereum and stake it in hex. And we did. And he was very appreciative of that. He texted me like a day later, and he's like, yeah, I just doubled my stake. I just put in twice as much money that I did before. And I'm just like, wow. So this man is also going to be helping me locate a house, because another thing that's happened to me regarding all of this is that not only am I in a place to buy a new car for the first time in my life, I'm also in a place to buy a house. And it came over me after coming back from Vegas. I was down for a few days and caught out sick from work one day. And during that time, the willingness came over me to buy a house in Pennsylvania, which is kind of striking, especially when I told my mom that, because the house that I had in mind, I wanted to buy something that would facilitate having a place for my mother to go to, because she's getting older, and eventually she's going to get to a place where she's going to need someone to look after her on a more personal level. And I wanted to provide a place for her in conjunction with me buying a house. I found a place out here in Arizona that had a mother-in-law suite, which is a separate apartment that comes with the house. And my mom's like, I don't want to live in Arizona. I've been in Pennsylvania my entire life, and I just wouldn't be happy out there. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just buy a house in Pennsylvania then. She's like, are you sure you want to do that? Because you've been saying for years that you would never, ever move back to Pennsylvania because of too much traffic, too many cars, too many people. And I'm like, yeah, I said that. And even if I still feel that way, when you become successful, that has a way of changing your attitude. And I realized, in the wake of all these things, that I was raised in Pennsylvania, and I moved out of there when I was 22 years old, and I was a very angry person when I did. And since just experiencing life, and especially after reaching a certain point in hex, it's like all the anger is gone. It's like all that burden has since been taken away. And it's like I want to buy my first house somewhere in relationship to where I come from as a token of success. Not to flex, but to actually contribute. And so this real estate agent is helping me in regard to that. I told him I'm looking for a house to live in, not to flip. I'm not looking to get into the real estate market. I'm looking for a place to live. And I want a place that is big enough that my mom can live without her life interfering with mine, and vice versa. So that made that part of the trip a very big highlight, just my relationship with this real estate agent and just how happy he is. Because all these people, they got in right before we pumped after 18 cents. They basically all got in at 18. Right after I left Pennsylvania, the price shot up to like 24, 25. It's kind of hard to keep track since I left Pennsylvania to now. It's hard to keep track with how much the price is going up, because it seems like we make a new all-time high every day. So anyway, everybody that I onboarded is just really happy. And I get texts from people. I just got a phone call from one of Vinny's brothers. He's like, man, how do I do this? And I just walked him through getting MetaMask and getting signed up on Coinbase and getting him started. So it's just been really awesome. So it's like I have a need to move back to Pennsylvania, because there's a there is a growing interest that I can help out with there. So that was pretty much I was only in Pennsylvania for 6 days, so it's like, I wanted to spend time. I visited with my other brother, who is got him into hex. My other brother got married last year, and I made a video about that. And I bought him and his wife shares or stakes of hex and staked them out for them. And he showed me his wallet and just how happy he was. He had like X amount of money in his MetaMask wallet, and he's like, we don't even know what to do with this money because we don't actually need it right now. So we're thinking about restaking it. I'm like, yeah, that's the wise thing to do. So they did, and they're doing really well. And my brother is a nurse, and he spent 6 months working directly with COVID patients. And he basically told my mother, we talked about this on the phone months ago, that he would give up his nursing career before he would accept one of those vaccinations, because he works, or he was under contract for a while. He worked with COVID patients. He's like, no way. He told my mom, don't get one of those things. So I was like, well, that's good. So everybody is doing very well back there. And like I said, I was only there 6 days, so I left and drove to Colorado because there were some things there that I was going to participate in during this road trip. I took a rental car, so I was a little constrained for time. I can hardly wait for my car to come in because the next road trip I take, it's like I won't be constrained time-wise. I could stop and visit more people along the way instead of just making really long treks. But went to Colorado, went to Denver. Richie Rich Crypto hosted a meetup. Spent the afternoon with him and one of his friends and the DJs from Las Vegas, and just had a great time together, just getting to know each other and talking about life and stuff. And then we separated for a few hours, then got back together. We went to a rooftop, I guess you'd call it a nightclub, but it was daytime. But it was a rooftop club that we went to. We met up there, and a girl named Kim met up with us also, and another guy who goes by the name of Lord Hex on Twitter. He met up with us, and we just spent some time there. At this particular club, you can only be there for 90 minutes because it's just limited seating, long line, just get in, enjoy it, get out, which was cool. So then we went to a pizza place afterwards for dinner, and just, it was a very good time. Just all got to talk, got to know each other, talked a lot about Pulse Chain, looking forward to the Pulse Chain launching, and after that meetup, the next morning, I went to a breakfast with, it was hosted by a nonprofit group called People for Liberty, and one of the people behind this is Dr. Jo Jorgensen, who is the Libertarian candidate for president. She ran in the 2020 election. And I asked her if she had any intention of running in 2024, and she said only if she could do something to help grow the party to make it worthwhile. So that's part of this nonprofit that she's a part of. It's a public relations effort to expose the Libertarian Party to the public in a more professional manner. libertarians tend to be pretty radical. If you go on Twitter and follow some of these people, they mostly post memes and stuff that are kind of funny, but a lot of people who don't understand the affairs of state may be kind of concerned with or intimidated by. So this effort that she's spearheading is to be a counteraction to that, to talk to normal people about the libertarian message and their efforts and the party and things of that nature. So it was a breakfast and a presentation, and afterwards she did photos and visited with people for a few minutes, so I got to get a picture and talk to her. So it was cool. It was actually very good. Also got to visit with a couple other people that I gotten to know through the party, and it was just, yeah, it was good. And then on the way, when I first started this trip, I was supposed to visit with a guy named Kinetics, who is one of the hosts of the Discourse Syndicate on YouTube, which is it's kind of like Hex's version of MTV. It's just a bunch of content creators just doing their thing in relationship to Hex. There's just different people doing different things. And I was supposed to meet up with him on my way to Pennsylvania, and miscommunication prevented that from happening, but we got that worked out, and I ended up visiting with him on the way home. So visiting with him was the last thing that happened on this trip. And visiting with him, it's like everything that happened prior to that was loading the bases. Visiting with him was hitting the ball over the fence, knocking it out of the park. Just because of his involvement in the community and involvement with people who are building things, and just his knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes, which I'm not going to talk about here because it's none of my business and I'm not involved with it, and it's basically just top secret stuff. But listening to him explain things to me was just, it's like everything that happened on this trip was mind-blowing, but this was just the top of the heap, and, and totally unexpected. But one of the things that he did explain, which isn't a secret, it's, if you understand the system, it's just common sense, but with the pulse chain that is going to be launching, basically it's going to be a mirror image of the Ethereum network. The Hex contract was built to operate on Ethereum. We can't remove it from Ethereum, which would be nice, because right now the expense of doing transaction on Ethereum is, I don't even want to describe it in words, but it's horrible. It's just highway robbery. It's confiscatory level stuff. Just gouging people to do transactions on their network. And, Richard didn't just sit back and say, well, that's your problem. I built the product and now you deal with it. No, he's spearheaded an effort, hiring developers to make a mirror image of the entire system state of the Ethereum blockchain, so that not only can Hex operate on a different network, everything in Ethereum can operate on this new network. That part I already knew. The part that blew my mind is, and it's my own fault because I didn't do my own due diligence to learn this myself, but the Hex that's going to exist, the Hex contract that's going to exist on the new network is going to be a mirror image of the original one. And what that means is that you're going to have a duplicate copy of all of your Hex tokens, whether they're staked or not, and all of your shares. I understood that too. Where I was confused is I thought that when the new network goes live, that we would have a choice between which network we want to end our stakes on in order to save on transaction fees. But as Kinetics was telling me, what it really means is if the value of hex on the new chain is as valuable as the hex on the original chain, you're not just doubling your tokens, you're actually doubling the dollar value of your stack. And that's what I didn't get. I thought because it's a mirror image, you have to choose between one or the other. You don't get both. Well, as it turns out, you do get both. So, I'm really looking forward to this pulse chain launching, to say the least. And the token of value on pulse chain, the pulse token, during the sacrifice phase, people who put into that sacrifice, the way that's supposed to be worked out is those are the people who will hold all the supply of the pulse tokens, because it's not going to inflate in supply. The entire supply is going to be released at the beginning. And the people who bought into the sacrifice phase, they're the only ones that will be the holders of that token. So they'll essentially have the market cornered from the get-go. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to make these tokens available to the public on exchanges and liquidity pools so they can be bought. But still, I'm really glad that I participated in that sacrifice phase, because at first it was kind of like whatever, because I was doing so well in Hex that it was just relative. All I was concerned with was cheap fees. So, yeah, this is going to be a great year. Last Richard said Pulse was supposed to launch around the beginning of November. We'll see. Software is hard. You know, Hex was delayed months and months and months, so Pulse Chain has already been delayed several times. So, you know, take as long as you want, just do it right. So, this has been what has happened with me with this road trip. And as I said, I got back Monday, and I just, you know, had to get back into the swing of things, because when I got back, I met up with my previous employer, who I had quit for my last road trip, then went back to a couple days a week just to help out, because since she was in Hex, I thought, I'll help you out a little bit. But I had to tell her that, you know, after this trip, it's like, I can't commit any more time to you. I'm not quitting, because I consider you a friend, so you can always call me and we can keep in touch, and, you know, I can make time to help you out with things that you really need my help on. But other than that, I'm really just, I'm not looking to work. When I told her what my yearly interest is, because I haven't done the math on that often, but I did it on this trip when the price started to pump. And when I realized, because of the shares that I have and the payout per share, and I told her that dollar value, she wasn't surprised when I told her that I'm just not in a frame of mind to do this kind of work anymore. She fully understood. So a lot of the things I'm going to be helping her with are actually things on her own house, like helping her replace her roof, for example. I want to help her do that just as a friend. And the guy that she actually is hiring to do that, we all know each other, and I probably will onboard him into Hex too. I don't think it'll be that hard. So, anyway, this has just been an awesome, life-changing trip, and looking forward to buying a house and going back to Pennsylvania. We'll see how that works. I told the agent I'd like to find a place by the end of the year, but I won't actually be able to move into it until next summer, because I need to keep my residency in the state of Arizona, because I have a motorhome that I ordered and it's being delivered here. I want it registered here so I can just drive it back and register it there. So I'll probably just be making more road trips back and forth, especially after my car arrives. So Hex is good. It's done well. And the funny thing is, we're barely getting started. We still don't have like any mainstream people saying nice things about us, if anything. Uh, we're still gate kept on the two largest coin aggregation sites. No real money has come into Hex. Um, I mean, I look at the Hexbot on Twitter, and it records some of the larger transactions of buys and sells, and they're never more than six-figure transactions. I've never seen like a $10 million buy or anything like that. So it's like the real money hasn't even come in yet. This is nothing. What's happening is regular people are just starting to see the value of staking Hex, because at first most of the people that were in were just your typical speculators. Buy low, sell high, wait for it to drop, buy it at a lower price, sell it high, wait for it to go down, just that cycle over and over. But Hex was not designed to function that way. And most of those people have sold their whole position, because as the price goes up, it's becoming more and more evident that the dips are short-lived, if they even happen at all, because more and more people are staking it so they can earn interest on it, which is the whole design intention of the product in the first place. So the price is going up significantly because there's just not as much to sell. And even if all of the liquid that exists is all dumped at one time, it's not going to drive the price down that much. It's kind of amazing. Kinetics was explaining that to me, and it's really awesome. So I hope everybody's well, and this video may get split up into a couple of smaller videos, just because of the time length of this one. Of course, that's kind of relative to say now at the end, but anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well.